Hi guys, today we will discuss about the different bones that are associated in the human skeletal system. Most often students get confused with identifying these particular different bones since it is a lot of memory is required. So let's walk through these particular different bones today. So whenever we talk about this skeletal system, it is broadly classified into two areas. The bones that are associated at the central area, we call them as axial skeleton. The bones that have append to this axial skeleton are known as appendicular skeleton. So which bones comes under axial skeleton? The cranium and the sternum or chest bone, rib cage, and the vertebral column. These four categories they come under axial skeleton. Then which one comes under appendicular one? These forelimbs and hand limbs and these pectoral girdle and pelvic girdle. So precisely we can say girdles and limbs they come under appendicular skeleton. So in the axial skeleton, the first one is cranium. So I'm going to explain these bones in detail in other video. So right now this is identified as cranium or skull. So cranium protects the brain. So if you move on the back side, a longitudinal column of bones that are attached with each other, we will be seeing each one is known as vertebrae. This column like one is known as vertebral column or spine we call it as. So depending on the area where these vertebrae are located, we categorized into different regions. If you go for the cervical region, that means at the neck region, so you will be seeing, this is the one, you will be seeing C1 to C7 vertebrae. We categorize that one as cervical vertebrae. Then in the thoracic area, you will be seeing 12 thoracic vertebrae, T1 to T12. Then at the lumbar area, you will be seeing 5 vertebrae, L1 to L5. And at this terminal area, few vertebrae that have been joined up to form one single structure, you call this particular structure as sacrum or sacral vertebrae that are fused, therefore we call it as sacrum. Then this final terminal tip-like projection, you call that one as coccyx, that is vestigial structure of the human body. So now when you move on to the forward, back side you have seen vertebral column, and at the front side, this particular necktie-like structure, flat bone, we call that particular one as sternum or chest bone we call it as. So this particular chest bone, sternum and back vertebral column, these both are joined with by means of these small flat thin structures we call it as ribs. Ribs, they all together they form the rib cage where internal organs are being protected. So if you happen to remember in this particular thoracic region, you will be seeing the heart and you will be seeing the lungs. So lungs and heart are the most vital organs, so they are being protected by this rib cage that has been formed by the ribs and in the front sternum, at the back vertebral column. So let's move on to the ribs. So if you check, this rib cage is formed by the ribs that are of three different variation conditions. So first one is true ribs, where exactly the ribs on one side they are attached to the sternum and other side attached to the vertebral column. Then you call them as true ribs. Almost 7 pairs are there. If you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. When you observe this one, you have seen this transparent structure. This is nothing but we call it as costal cartilage. These ribs are associated with the sternum by means of these costal cartilage, so that it gives somewhat flexibility to expand this particular rib cage during the respiration process. you already know that rib cage is the one that harbors the lungs. So lungs will expand and it will deflate during the process of respiration. So for that it has to accommodate the cavity in a way where it can have the flexibility to increase or decrease, right? Okay, then next is, if you go and check, there are three pairs of vertebrae, three on this side, three on this side. These three vertebrae, they are not actually associated with this particular sternum. See here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These 7 are directly attached. They are true ribs. But these three, 1, 2, 3, they are not directly attached to the sternum. Instead, they go and join to this last true rib. You call these ones as false ribs. Why do we call false ribs? Because they are not directly associated with attachment to the sternum. Then as we move, the last one, these two pairs of the ribs, they are known as floating ribs. They are not, why is it known as floating ribs? Because they are not associated with this particular sternum. They are freely floating in the thoracic area. Therefore, they are known as floating ribs. So these are the true ribs, and these are the false ribs, and these are the floating ribs. So let's move on to the collarbone. This particular collarbone is known as clavicle. This clavicle, on one side, in the front, it is attached to this chest bone, that is sternum. On the other side, it is attached to this shoulder bone or shoulder blade. We call it as scapula. Okay, now let's move on to the shoulder blade. That is nothing but scapula. So if you see this particular one, it is triangle shaped structures that is associated with the second rib to that of the seventh rib that is attached to the that particular part of the rib cage. Then if you observe, even clavicle is also attached to this, and even this humerus, the forelimbs, that particular first bone is also associated with this one. So moreover, if you see, this particular area is nothing but we call it as girdle, shoulder girdle or pectoral girdle we call it as, and the main structures in this is this clavicle and this particular scapula. So generally students do get confused with scapula and to that of the sternum. Remember the chest bone, this necktie is nothing but sternum. Remember this particular shoulder blade, that is called scapula, right? Okay, now let's move on to pelvic girdle. We have discussed about the pectoral girdle, that is appendicular skeleton one, and second is the pelvic girdle, that is situated at the pelvic region. So this is also known as pelvis. This particular girdle, if you see, it is made with, each half is made with three associated bones, ilium, ischium and pubis. So as we see this one, this supports this pelvic area. If it is a female, then it has got broader area of this one. Therefore, during the childbirth, it is parturition becomes easy. That means child delivery becomes easy. Okay, let's move on to the next part of appendicular skeleton, that is forelimbs. So if you see the forelimbs, it has got three distinctive areas, upper arm and forearm and then hand, we can say. So if you see here, this particular upper arm is made with one single bone known as humerus. Humerus will have articulation with that of this particular pectoral girdle. Then as you see here in this particular forearm, you will be seeing two associated bones. One is ulna and one is radius. The main thing is which one to consider ulna and which one to consider radium. So I remember always in this way, radius is the one that is radiating to that of this thumb, radiating to the thumb, we call that one as radius. And backside of that particular radius is known as ulna, we call it as. You can say radius is little bit just deviated, we can say that also, right? So the one that is extended towards radiating towards this particular thumb is known as radius, and the one that is back is known as ulna. Then followed by next this particular hand, it has got the wrist bones, and it has got this particular palm, and it has got this particular digits. Now when you go for this wrist one, wrist bones are known as carpals, like this. Then followed by the main part of this hand, palm is been made with the metacarpals. Carpals is related to the hand, and tarsals are related to that of the foot. So don't get confused. Carpals for the wrist bone, and metacarpals that are for the palm. Then for the fingers, the digits or phalanges are there. All these particular ones will have 3 phalanges, that means 3 digits, except the thumb that has only 2 digits. Remember that. So let's move on to the last part of this appendicular skeleton, that is leg bones or hand bones, we call it as. This is also having the 3 distinctive areas. This particular thigh bone is nothing but femur. This is the longest and largest bone of the human body. Followed by this particular 2 associated bones, we call it as a tibia and fibula. So how do you identify which one is tibia and which one is fibula? I generally remember in this way. The feeble one, the thin one, is known as fibula, that is outside of the leg, and the one that is a large stout one is tibia. So generally we call this particular fibia is calf bone, and shin bone is this particular tibia. Then as we move on to this foot area, this particular area, ankle, it is formed by the tarsal bones. Here it is carpal bones, and this is tarsal bones. One of the tarsal bone that you will be seeing, it's a large and it is protruded little backward. This particular one is nothing but bone of the heel. So as we move towards this particular foot, a part of the foot area is also constructed by this tarsal bones. Then the rest of the foot main body is formed by the metatarsals. So metatarsals, then followed by these toe bones, which we call it as digits or phalanges. So phalanges here also, phalanges here also. But the difference here is metatarsals here, and here metacarpals. And here tarsals, and this one is carpals. Here it is humerus, and here it is femur. Here it is radius and ulna, and here it is tibia and fibula. So always generally students get confused with these particular regions of the 4 limbs to that of the hand limbs. So make sure you get the clarity regarding the what bone is associated to what particular limb, right? I think with this we have covered the entire bones that are associated with skeletal system. Hope you will identify without any confusion. Thank you.